That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, so a lot has changed since a couple of our rankings videos, since a couple of our must-start videos, where now we have the official injuries for Sunday. We're going to be going through talking about the players that are playing. We're going to be talking about the players that are sitting out. But most importantly, we're going to be talking about the impacts that it will have in the respective offenses that these injured players are in. But before we get into it, you know exactly what I have to do. We have to go through really quick and pull up our last YouTube video so we can give away some Fantasy Flock Network hats. Now, it looks like I do not have a hat sitting next to us because I'm an idiot, but y'all know exactly what the hats look like. Let's go through and let's grab a comment right here. And now let's just grab this first one coming out from Ben Aru. Says, this guy, Mason, is no-lifing it for us. You got to love it. Yeah, definition of a no-life here. This is all I do 24/7. We'll grab that right now. And then our next comment coming out says from Jay Fang, who says, hey Mason, would really love a flock hat. Thanks for everything. No, my friend, thank you so much for supporting the channel for a very long time now. I know you've been out here. So yeah, those are going to be our comment hat giveaways. Of course, just go to the email in the description of the video. Send me that email saying that you won that Fantasy Flock Network hat. I'll be super happy to get that out to you ASAP. And yeah, let's go through and let's talk about these injury updates. And the first one we're going to discuss will be Chase Claypool. Now, this Chase Claypool injury update is honestly kind of embarrassing because if we were going back to what I was talking about on Monday, going back to what I was talking about on Tuesday, literally I was just telling people in the live streams, oh yeah, Chase Claypool probably a good play this week, knowing that you could have either Deontay Johnson or Juju Smith-Schuster potentially missing this week, and that would see an expanded target share for Chase Claypool in what should be a game that you're not too worried about the Green Bay Packers defense, even though they got Jaire Alexander, of course. Well, it looks like we are wrong about Chase Claypool even playing in this game, and it looks like Juju Smith-Schuster and Deontay Johnson are both removed from the injury report. Now, I'll say, I think that you can confidently play Juju or Deontay Johnson in a PPR format, understanding that in a non-PPR league, I mean, they're not necessarily wide receivers that you'd like to go after. Just looking at this Pittsburgh Steelers offense, understanding that the overall amount of production that's going to be there, it's not going to be fantastic with how we have seen Ben Roethlisberger play pretty much for the past year now. So it really comes down to if you're playing in a PPR format, if you want to be playing Juju Smith-Schuster or Deontay Johnson. Both of these guys were officially removed from the injury report, so I think that you would feel comfortable playing them on Sunday. Not too concerned with Jaire Alexander. Now, I think that he is most likely going to be going up against Deontay Johnson, knowing that Juju Smith-Schuster will run the majority of his routes out of the slot. So with that being said, maybe you go and fade Deontay Johnson, play Juju Smith-Schuster. But y'all know exactly how biased I am when we say that. So maybe I'm just trying to grasp at straws here to tell you to play Juju and sit Deontay. I think both are fine plays in a PPR format just based on how many targets they could get with no Chase Claypool in this offense. Now let's go to our next piece of news we have. Let's go to Rob Gronkowski, who's officially out on Sunday. And with Gronk, sucks that we don't get him to play against the New England Patriots in a game that Tom Brady's going to pass Drew Brees in all-time passing yards. I mean, I think this would be just a game that the narrative is strong, obviously. And I mean, there are going to be a ton of people watching this matchup. Rob Gronkowski going up against the New England Patriots would have been really fun to see, but he is no longer going to be here. So now we have to turn our attention to Antonio Brown in particular. Now, we're not really going to talk about Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, because obviously you're starting those two wide receivers regardless of if Rob Gronkowski's playing or not. Well, Antonio Brown's someone that I really want to be getting in our starting lineup. We've already discussed this previously, but I wouldn't be surprised if Bruce Arians just allows Tom Brady to throw this ball 50 plus times this game, completely abandons the run, lets Tom Brady go rack up 350 passing yards. And with no Rob Gronkowski in this offense, you should expect the overall chance that you're getting a touchdown scored from Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, any of those wide receivers, it's going to be going up. I mean, you're not expecting a ton of targets getting added their stat line just because, I mean, we know Gronk is not necessarily a target hog to begin with, but he does get that usage in the red zone that can now be going over to a different wide receiver. I think this makes Antonio Brown a must-start wide receiver. I mean, we already talked about it, but I think it's a good matchup. I think this is a spot where you can see a ton of passing volume. And obviously, Antonio Brown is Antonio Brown. Tom Brady is Tom Brady. And I think that's really all we have to say there. Now, our next piece of news, not necessarily an injury, but I definitely want to be covering this. LeVeon Bell. Okay, so here with LeVeon Bell, looks like he may actually play this Sunday. And if he were to play, that 100% has to change your stance on Tyson Williams. And Tyson Williams was a running back that I didn't even want to start last week against the Detroit Lions. We called him a must-bench running back, understanding that this is a Baltimore Ravens backfield that's just going to get more and more diversified between Devontae Freeman, between Latavius Murray, and I guess now between LeVeon Bell, and just that you're looking at Tyson Williams, never a super talented running back. Yes, he looked good in week 1, week 2, but we know that's the majority of the case based on what you get with Lamar Jackson, just how he has to affect those linebackers, and the linebackers can't crash down on the running back when he goes to hand it off. So LeVeon Bell is looking like he could play here. I think that really tells us this coaching staff does not really prefer Tyson Williams over any of these guys. And I think you desperately need to find a different option over Tyson Williams for your running back 2 spot if you're currently planning on starting Tyson Williams, because the workload simply is not going to be there. Don't love the matchup against the Denver Broncos. Now our next piece of news is going to be Kenny Golladay removed from the injury report. Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, both listed as out this week. Okay, so this has to make it where Kenny Golladay is a wide receiver that you are 100% starting. Now, of course, going up against Marshawn Lattimore, this is a spot where we would really like to avoid it. We don't like this matchup against the New Orleans Saints. I would expect that this New York Giants offense is one of the worst offenses in the NFL this week. Now, with that being said, with both Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard being removed from this offense, with Evan Ingram clearly still not healthy from that calf injury. I mean, we saw Evan Ingram this past week look very disappointing in what should have been a plus matchup. Kenny Golladay is someone that you have to jam in your starting lineup. Yes, we already discussed this is going to be a bad offense, a bad game environment, but the percentage of targets that he's going to be seeing from his own quarterback is going to be through the roof. I mean, very similar to what we said about starting Allen Robinson, looking at Allen Robinson as someone who got 30% of his team's targets this past week. And yes, I mean, it was a week where you all had no production whatsoever, but we're still having to sit here and saying, yeah, it's probably a pretty good idea to just continue to play these alpha wide receivers if they are attached to bad quarterbacks, attached to bad offenses. We know a lot of the times the volume just with pure targets can actually get them to a range where they were worthy of being started. I think it's the similar thing here with Kenny Golladay. The volume is going to dictate that you have to play him, even though the matchup is disgusting. Now let's go over to our next wide receiver. Let's go over to Rashod Bateman. Now with Bateman, I mean, right now, it looks like we don't have an official report on if he's going to be good to go on Sunday. I do want to bring him up and that this is something we're going to have to continue to monitor until Sunday morning. If Rashod Bateman does look like he's going to be active, this will be a spot that I think you have to be a lot more worried about Hollywood Brown. Now, we're not expecting Bateman to come in and automatically be the wide receiver 1 in Baltimore, but you would expect Bateman to come in and at least draw a considerable amount of snaps. And if he's getting those snaps, I think the overall target share that you should expect from Hollywood Brown is slightly going to dip down. Obviously, Hollywood had 1 million drops this past week against the Detroit Lions. I'll say we got lucky. Very, very lucky. I mean, you know, I'm the first person to come out and say, oh, look at me. I'm so smart. Look, I did something right. Well, for me to tell y'all to bench Hollywood Brown this past week, oh my gosh, it was horrendous looking back at how that game played out, because I mean, if Hollywood Brown would have came down with every one of those targets that he had that was a reasonable reception, you would have seen Hollywood Brown just break fantasy football. He would have dropped like 25 fantasy points this past week. So I think at this point, I mean, you're still looking at it going, okay, well, yeah, he has the upside, but if Rashod Bateman plays, Hollywood's a lot less appealing. Now, our next wide receiver will be Jamison Crowder. Going to keep it very brief here. Jamison Crowder going to play this week. You're not looking at starting Jamison Crowder, but this does make it where Corey Davis is slightly less appealing. Corey Davis has been that Allen Robinson type player, getting every single target for the New York Jets. And obviously, if you would expect this offense to be more productive against the Tennessee Titans, there Corey Davis could take a step forward. But Jamison Crowder coming in is going to make that a little less likely. Now, our next wide receiver will be Tyler Lockett, who right now we don't have the official clearance that he'll play on Sunday, but it's looking like Tyler Lockett will most likely be playing against the San Francisco 49ers. I think this game will be a little bit surprising with the amount of points that are actually put up on the board. I know both these teams want to quote-unquote establish the run. I don't necessarily think that that's going to be allowed in this game, knowing that the 49ers aren't going to have their full running back core, and with Seattle, if they get behind, they're going to have to lean on the pass. So if Tyler Lockett's active, you go through and play Tyler Lockett. Yes, I went through and just jammed Tyler Lockett into that sell high video just a week ago because, I mean, obviously this is a player, as we said so many times last week, that you could easily see some blow up performances week to week. We know that we have had that for him for a very long time, but the problem is just getting that sustained production over a long period. Here, Lockett, it doesn't matter if he's active, you play him. Now, going into that same matchup, Elijah Mitchell right now looking like he may be a game time decision. I mean, Kyle Shanahan came out and said it would be very impressive if he was able to go through and play. So the wording that he had wasn't necessarily the best. But with that being said, I just think that you have Elijah Mitchell here as a running back that you're not starting regardless. And with the worries that he could be playing later on Sunday, I think that it also makes it where you can't really consider starting Trey Sermon as well because, I mean, I don't have the official time for this game, but I'd imagine that it's going to be one of the later games considering it's on the West Coast between the 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. Let me pull this up just to confirm, but I'm almost certain. So yeah, this game is going to be at 4 tomorrow, whereas I'd imagine you have to consider those other players for the 1 p.m. slate. So I would say right now you can't start either San Francisco 49er running back given the fact that we don't have clarity on that situation. Now, on that same team, George Kittle, this is going to be another situation to monitor. I will say, if I had George Kittle, I personally would be going through and just planning on playing him every single week. Now, even if we're going into the week where he doesn't necessarily look like he's going to be 100%, there's a small chance that he actually misses. I would say if we're going to be looking to pick up an emergency option for George Kittle, go get Max Williams for the Arizona Cardinals. That could be a switch that you could make if George Kittle was ruled inactive before those games. Go get Eric Ebron or Pat Freiermuth. The Pittsburgh Steelers also play very late tomorrow as well. So there are a couple interesting pivot spots that you could have. I would personally plan on playing George Kittle, but if he is out, you have to bump up Brandon Ayuk, bump up Deebo Samuel, just because they would see more volume in that offense. Now, our next player will be Melvin Gordon, who pops up on the injury report this past week. I mean, with Melvin Gordon, I would be surprised if he misses this game. I mean, it was a late addition to the injury report, but I just want to bring it up saying I'm not playing Melvin Gordon. I'm currently not playing Javonte Williams. I think that this is going to be the worst matchup you've had so far by the Denver Broncos going up against the Baltimore Ravens. I'd imagine this is a spot where the overall offense isn't necessarily finding it as easy to move the ball down the field. So personally, I'm not planning on playing either running back, but if Melvin Gordon were to get ruled out, then all of a sudden you jam in Javonte Williams. Now, Will Fuller is officially listed as good to go on Sunday with Will Fuller here. I mean, with him being good to go, this is making it where I want nothing to do. I hate to say it, nothing to do with Jalen Waddle here. Jalen Waddle has looked fantastic as of late. Now, with Jalen Waddle here, I mean, yes, he commands so much target this past week, but at the end of the day, you're looking at Jacoby Brissett. He's had like a 3.8 adjusted yards per attempt number, which is laughably bad. I mean, this is a situation that the quarterback play is going to be some of the worst in the NFL. If Will Fuller's coming in, taking targets away from Jalen Waddle, I literally don't know a single player I'd be willing to start on the Miami Dolphins. I think this is an entire situation we're just avoiding. Now, our next player will be Daryl Henderson, listed as good to go for Sunday. Daryl Henderson, this is a matchup. Really excited about what we'll have against the Arizona Cardinals. Not worried about this Arizona Cardinals defense. At the same time, with Daryl Henderson here, we know that he's going to be playing in what should be one of the most productive offenses in the NFL this week. I mean, the Rams are going to be putting up a considerable amount of points. I'd imagine that this game is very high scoring. So sign me up for playing a running back behind a good offensive line and one of the most productive offenses in football. If he is going to be that lead guy, which Daryl Henderson also, I will say, kind of surprised me earlier this year with the amount of targets he was getting out of the backfield because we weren't necessarily profiling him to be someone that could see a ton of usage in his receiving game. But I mean, I believe in week 2, he had like 3-4 receptions out of this backfield. And if he's hitting that baseline, I think that's a fantastic mark. Now our next piece of news is not news at all. Everybody knows that. I just, in case there's like 1% of people out here that hasn't heard it quite yet, Julio Jones, A.J. Brown both ruled out this game. You're not starting any wide receiver on Tennessee. I know it's a great matchup against the New York Jets. The only player you can play for the Tennessee Titans this week will be Derrick Henry. You can't start Ryan Tannehill. They're going to give the ball to Derrick Henry 30 plus times this game. I mean, I'm worried about this overall offense, not going to lie. But I think with that being said, Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, just because they're leaving a lot of targets behind doesn't mean you can just go through and jam in the next wide receiver. Identifying who the next wide receiver may be would actually be a lot harder said than done. So I think that we're just going to avoid this situation. Now, our next player out will be Russell Gage. With Gage here, you weren't considering going through and playing him regardless, but someone you could consider playing, especially now, is actually going to be Kyle Pitts. I think that Kyle Pitts is very interesting in that if you're looking at Russell Gage being out, there are just very few options that you can go through. I mean, Calvin Ridley right now, of course, is that bona fide stud wide receiver we have talked about being a very low, interesting buy low candidate. And here with Russell Gage being out, I mean, there are just a ton of targets available in what's not necessarily that worrisome of a matchup against the Washington football team. I also think that Cordell Patterson becomes interesting based on the amount of targets that he had this past week as well. So yeah, I would think that this makes you more excited about Pitts, more excited about Ridley, and now puts Cordell Patterson on the radar if you're desperate for a running back 2 play. Now, our next player is going to be someone that looks like they're going to be good to go with Dalvin Cook. And yes, we won so many weeks last week by just going in and jamming in Alexander Mattison, knowing that Alexander Mattison had that bell cow level potential if Dalvin Cook missed. And yes, Mattison crushed for us. And I know we've had a lot of people coming out going, oh, no, Dalvin Cook's only going to get 50% of the workload. Alexander Madison's going to get 50%, yada, yada, yada. Dalvin Cook's not 100%. If Dalvin Cook is active, it is like the easiest thing you ever do. There's no decision here. You bench Alexander Mattison and you start Dalvin Cook. It doesn't matter who your other options are. You can't start Mattison with Dalvin Cook being good to go. And you can't consider benching Dalvin Cook. I don't care about the matchup against the Cleveland Browns. Yes, it's a difficult spot, but still, Dalvin Cook is Dalvin Cook. Now, our last player will be Curtis Samuel, who is listed as good to go. So this is very simple. You can't play Curtis Samuel. I mean, if we do get some sustained production, then we can consider going through and putting him in our lineup. But we have to be bumping down Terry McLaurin just slightly. We have to be bumping down Logan Thomas just slightly, knowing that there is another addition to this offense. Hopefully the entire offense improves based on the speed that Curtis Samuel has, maybe stretching the field just slightly. But I think you need to be bumping down the other options. And Taylor Heineke, somewhat of an intriguing option in a very decent matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. And obviously with another passing game weapon, I think he is more intriguing. Now, thank you. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Of course, go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I'll be live streaming tonight. I'll be live streaming on Sunday morning. So, of course, if you have any start sit questions, come out, ask it then. If not, if you're not available, just ask it in the comment section right now. And I'll be trying to get to as many start sit questions as I possibly can. And yeah, that's all I got for y'all. And have a great day.